I'll do that again. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's session is what's new in the APA 7th edition. Today's presenter is Janice Masud-Paul, the Librarian for Health Science Research here at Drexel University. Janice, take it away.
Okay, hello everyone, and thanks so much for coming out. I'm actually going to stop sharing my video and go ahead and get started. So again, we're going to be talking about what's new in APA 7th edition. APA's made some long-awaited changes to its citation style, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the differences between version 6 and version 7, as opposed to a general discussion of APA. Now, I noticed when I looked at the list of some of the folks that signed up that there are some real research heavy hitters out there. So please feel free to jump in and share your knowledge about APA or any of the elements as we talk about APA. Maybe we can have a discussion about this. And Darren, if I don't see their hands raised, please let me know, because it's hard for me to see that when I'm looking at my slides.
No problem. Folks, if you have questions for Janice as you go along, you can drop it into the chat and I'll pause at a good moment and interrupt her when that's appropriate.
Sounds great. But before we talk about APA, I wanted to say a little bit about citation styles in general. Citation styles, they dictate a presentation format for written research, including writing composition and systems for citing resources. Now, there are tons of styles out there. As a student, I pretty much just use whatever style my teacher told me to use or my professor told me to use. I didn't give a whole lot of thought to why one style was preferred over another. But disciplines choose styles based on the information that's important to them and the things that they want to highlight. So for example, here I have the MLA style, it's the Modern Language Association, and that's used in literary fields and with other subjects in the humanities where there are lots and lots of quotes. So it allows you to cite page numbers without interrupting the flow of discussion. And you can see here this comes from Hawkins, page number 1. Most of the disciplines at CNHP use either APA or AMA, but there are variations within those disciplines. There was a study in 2018 where they looked at 245 journals in the directory of nursing journals. They found that 70% of those journals were using APA and 23% were using AMA styles. Other health science disciplines like nutrition, they sort of skew towards AMA. Now, APA uses an author date system for citation, and that allows you to see immediately who's cited and the currency of the study. The references are listed alphabetically by author. Author date systems are really popular in the social sciences. The American Medical Association, or AMA style, that's commonly used when you're reporting research from fields of science and medicine. AMA uses subscripts for in-text citations, and the references are listed in order by their appearance in manuscripts. So what style should you choose? Well, if you're a student, you use what your professor tells you to use. But if your professor is flexible about what style to use, then you can choose the style of your choice. But I suggest that the more you use a style, the more it will become rote. So you probably want to get in the habit of using the style of your discipline. Also make sure that you use the same style throughout your document, regardless of which style you choose to use. Make sure it's the same style. If you're writing to publish, use the style for your target journal. Now, typically you can find that information from their website in the instruction for author section or something that's named similar to that. Journals may have specific reasons for using one style over another, even if it's not clear to the author. And sometimes journals have their own styles, and they're based on modified versions of existing publication styles. Here's a little tip. If you use a bibliographic citation tool like EndNote to manage your references, You can simply select the target journal style from the EndNote list, and then the correct citation style for that journal will load in Word automatically. It'll also help you to switch citation styles in your manuscript with relative ease if you're using something like EndNote. So let's say you write a paper for a class and you write that in AMA style, but you need to publish that article in a journal that uses a different style. You can just go to EndNote and change your style, and it will change the appearance of the citations and references in your paper. Now, I'm not talking about the formatting or the margins or the tables or anything like that, just the citations and the references, but that's still a pretty heavy lift. So it's helpful to use bibliographic citation tools like EndNote. Back to APA. So here we have the 6th edition and the 7th edition manual. These may look pretty familiar to you. There's a general consensus that the new manual, version 7, is a major improvement over the 6th edition. I really found the 6th edition to be pretty obtuse on a good day when I used it. But APA introduced version 7 back in October of 2019, so almost a year ago. It really doesn't seem like it was that long ago. I'm aware that all of you may not have made that switch for various reasons. There are too many minor changes to discuss, so I want to focus on notable changes to things like the paper format, in-text citations, and reference lists. And I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the other APA resources in addition to the manual. We're going to look at those other resources live. So let's start with the paper elements. With the 7th edition, APA provided a format for student papers, and I want to compare some of the elements of the professional papers to the student paper. This is the professional format. So for both APA style papers, whether it's a professional or a student paper, it's going to require a title page. The elements included in the paper title, which summarizes the main idea of the paper, are the title of the paper, the name of each author of the paper, and the affiliation of each author, and that identifies where the author currently works. You also need to put a page number on all the pages, even the title page. The author note includes information like where the author is working, ORCID IDs, disclaimers, conflicts of interest, funding, or contact information if there are any changes in that affiliation. And if the article is being submitted for publication, it needs to have a running head. So the running head is a version of the paper title, but it only contains the first 50 characters, and it's always in caps. One of the changes in the running head from version 6 to version 7 is that it no longer includes the label running head, just the name of the running head. The running head is included on subsequent pages as well. Now in professional papers, the first page is followed by an abstract page and keywords are assigned to the paper. This is an example of a student paper. We tell students to follow the guidelines from their instructor to determine if they should be using the professional version or the student version. The elements of the student page are very similar to the professional page, but there's no running head in student papers. That's unless the professor chooses otherwise. And the author affiliation is typically the university the student's attending, along with their department or division. They would also include their course number and the date that the paper is due. Student papers typically don't have an abstract or keyword page, but again, that's at the author's discretion. I want to say a little bit about fonts. The 7th edition has more font options. So instead of being limited to Times New Roman 12, and I think Arial 11 was the other one, you can use additional typeface options. Now, this is a welcome addition because several of these fonts contain special characters like math symbols, and they may not have been readily available in Times New Roman. Other element changes include things like heading levels. These changes were made to make the heading stand out and improve readability. The 7th edition changes only apply to level 3, 4, and 5 headings. All the headings are written in boldface with the important words capitalized. So these are the ones that changed. And these headings are in what they call sentence case. Now we're going to switch to in-text citations and references, which tend to be the first thing that people consider when they think about style guides. I know that was true for me. The role of the in-text citation is to immediately give attribution to the author whenever you're quoting or paraphrasing their work to prevent unintentional plagiarism. Of course, you're not going to plagiarize intentionally. And then the reference lists show readers where they can find the work. And a lot of times I'll get questions from students about whether they should cite or not cite. Basically, if you're using words, ideas, or images from other researchers, you need to provide appropriate credit in the text and reference lists. And that includes, by the way, anything that you may have published as well. You need to cite yourself. So cite whenever you directly quote, paraphrase, or summarize a work. You don't have to cite common knowledge or your original thoughts. And common knowledge is considered information that most people already know, like things like Barack Obama was president of the United States, or water freezes at 32 degrees. Of course, what's common knowledge can really vary based upon your audience or your culture, but I often tell people if they're in doubt, just go ahead and cite it. The other thing is sometimes I find it's challenging to recognize what's actually your original thought versus someone else's thoughts, especially if you've been researching an area for some time. But just cite it if you're in doubt, or you can always ask your professor, or you can check with someone at the library. So for most of the remaining changes, I'm going to show you examples for the 6th edition on the left and the 7th edition on the right, and I invite you to compare the two examples. Creating in-text citations, it's a little less tedious in version 7 than in version 6, because in version 7, if you have 3 or more authors, you just cite the first author followed by et al. But of course, there's an exception. So the exception would occur if doing it this way would create ambiguity. For example, if you've got 2 papers that have first listed authors with the same name. In that case, you're going to want to list as many names as you can to differentiate the papers followed by et al. So in this example, let's say you had 2 papers you were citing, and both of those papers were written by Taylor, Kotler, and Johnson. If you needed a 4th author to differentiate between the 2 articles, you would include Parker as well, even though it's the 7th edition. There are several reference list changes. Now, although the number of authors cited in in-text citations were shortened, this is where they get you, because if you're doing a reference list, you need to list up to the first 20 authors. When you get to the 21st author, you're allowed to use the ellipse. DOIs, digital object identifiers, are unique persistent links. And since they don't change over time, it makes it easier to retrieve a resource and for people to find it. In version 7, DOIs are formatted the same as a URL. You no longer use the label DOI as you did in the 6th edition. Now remember, DOIs aren't just for articles anymore. Sometimes you'll find DOIs in books. They're usually on their copyright page. So if you have a book that contains a DOI, include it in the reference. Sometimes these DOIs can get really, really long. So you can use a shortened DOI that you can obtain from the official international DOI site called doi.org. If for some reason you're working with an item that doesn't have a DOI, you can use a URL. The part of the citation that includes a publisher is now called the source. So you can see in this example that the source no longer contains the publisher location. Apparently this drove people crazy. APA got a lot of complaints about that. I think sometimes the publisher locations were ambiguous or difficult to find. So you don't have to include them in version 7. Now for web pages, URLs are no longer preceded by the term retrieved from unless a retrieval date is needed. So think about resources like Wikipedia or maybe up to date. They have content that changes really frequently. So if you're citing a Wikipedia article, in that case you would use the word retrieved followed by the date. But the retrieved in this case is really to provide date information as opposed to location information like you used to use in retrieved from. Also notice in this example under APA 7, you include the website name. So in this case, the website name is BBC News. You don't include it, however, if the website name is the same as the author. So if this article was written by BBC News and we didn't know about the author A. Walker, we would replace A. Walker with BBC News and you wouldn't have a need to include the website name. Although it's somewhat difficult to see, the title of the website page is italicized, which I believe is new in version 7. So that would be Germany avoids recession. You would italicize that. For ebooks, the format, platform, or device is no longer included in the reference. So in this case, that would be Kindle. You wouldn't bother to use Kindle in the 7th edition because it's really not that relevant, but you would include the publisher if you had that information. In general, the new manual has much more guidance on citing e-resources and social media. So in the manual, you can find information on how to treat YouTube videos for citations and references, references to Twitter and other social media. I think someone mentioned the other day that they actually have references for TikTok now, although I've heard that's on the website as opposed to in the manual. And there's a lot of information on emoji and hashtag treatment. So for example, they say you should try to duplicate an emoji in your reference, the actual picture of the emoji. But if you can't, you can provide the official emoji's name in brackets. And if you don't know how to find the formal name of an emoji, you can actually look that up on an emoji chart from the Uniform Consortium website. If anyone is interested, happy to provide that information. The new manual is really clear about who should be considered the author for particular media types. And I actually get this question a lot. So if you're citing a film, it's the director that's considered the author, and the director's name would go in the place that the author's name would go. If it's a podcast, it's the podcast host. And for webinars, which we're all listening to a lot of these days, you would use the instructor as the author. Here's an example of what that looks like. In the reference, this is the author, or the instructor, excuse me, would be S. Huckins. And then you would have the title of the webinar with the word webinar in brackets and information for getting to that webinar. Couple of changes in style mechanics. And when version 7 came out, this was the first thing that I heard about. One space following punctuation at the end of a sentence. So the period, and then just one space instead of two. This one space rule is controversial for some reason, but APA recommends one space, but it's left to the discretion of the instructor, probably because it's controversial. And actually, I think that that was on their website for a few years. I don't think that's new, but it's the first time it came out in the publication manual. And then the use of quotation marks around linguistic examples for highlighting instead of italics. I actually have an example here that says press the enter key, where you would use quotation marks around enter instead of italicizing it. And that's primarily because quotation marks are easier to discern in screen readers than italics. So it makes the text more accessible to a larger portion of your audience. I think some of the more important changes address terminology. APA encourages singular they and their pronouns, and you would use they as a generic third-person singular pronoun to refer to a person whose gender is unknown, or to refer to a person who uses they as their preferred pronoun. You also want to use adjectives as, avoid using adjectives as nouns to label people. Descriptive phrases are preferred. So in this case, rather than using poor people, you would use people living in poverty. Specificity is also encouraged. So here, instead of saying over 65, you would give an actual range whenever possible. Racial and ethnic groups are identified as proper nouns. So you would capitalize terms like Indigenous people, Aboriginal people, and African Americans when those terms are used. And there's also guidance on disability, including first-person language, like people with autism, versus identity first language, such as autistic people. Now, either one of those might be fine, but it really depends on the preference of that group. I know that some students are required to purchase the style manual, but there are also some supplementary tools that you can use in addition to the manual, like the APA website, Purdue OWL's site, and the APA blog. So I just wanted to take a few moments to show you the type of information that you find on those sites. I'm going to move from my PowerPoint and go live. But before I do that, I want to make it really clear. I am not saying that because you have access to these sites, you do not have to buy the manual. If you've been asked to buy the manual, you'll find that there are so many different examples within this manual that they're not going to cover in a site like Purdue or even the APA website. Those are more general examples that you come across, day to day. But the manual is going to have some very nuanced and specific examples that you won't find otherwise. So buy the manual, but also you can use these resources as backups. So let me see if I can hop over to Purdue. And this is the site from Purdue University. You can see that in addition to covering APA style 7th edition, they also cover a number of different styles. So if you're using APA and AMA and other styles, you can find them here as well. You can also find a lot of really annoying videos. I'm going to close that out. For APA 7, they give you general format information, like covering in-text citations, rules for reference lists, and sample papers. And again, they will cover the student paper as well as the professional paper.
Janice, Jeff, there was one question that came up in the chat.
Yep.
It is, if we were to publish something, we would use, would we use Drexel CNHP even though we don't, quote, work here? I think this comes from a student. Did I have that right? So I'll read that again. If we were to, I'll read it again.
Sure.
What she says is, if we were to publish something, would we use CNH or Drexel CNHP even if we don't work here? So this is a question from a student.
I believe so. Let me see. I'll see if I can pull that up in a moment, but I believe you would use the College of Nursing and Health Professions as the place of publication. Excuse me, as the place you're publishing from, even though you don't work there.
Jessica, did that answer your question? Yes, thank you.
Okay, and we'll bring that up as an example when we actually go to their website and make a note of that, so you can see what that looks like. Before I leave Purdue, I just wanted to point out that if you're working with APA 6, you can find the same information or the same coverage of information for APA 6 as for APA 7. It's just no longer the default. So if you click on this link, it will take you over to the APA 6th edition information. I have no idea how long they're going to keep that here, but it's certainly here for now. The other thing worth mentioning are these resources for citing references. So if you put in a title, a keyword, or a URL here, you can cite it as a web page, a book, a journal title, and so on. This particular citation tool is not Purdue OWL's. It's from the citation machine. Okay, so it's third party. This note here that says use citation machines responsibly, I can't stress that enough. These things are not perfect. They're just sort of tools that get you started, but make sure you double check to make sure that the formatting is exactly what it should be for your particular style. And often when I'm working, not only do I have the manual next to me, but some kind of cheat sheet or something. So if I'm going to use a tool like this, I just kind of eyeball or double check it because sometimes you'll find errors. And I guess the most common errors that you'll find are things like not italicizing the titles of journal articles, or making the titles of journals all caps. Excuse me, yeah, making the title of articles all caps. So just double check. I'm going to move from Purdue to the APA Style Guide, and that's at apastyle.org. And I'll admit, the first time I came to this website for the 7th edition, I actually thought for a moment that it was the manual because there's an awful lot of information here in terms of examples. If you go to the Style and Grammar Guidelines section, for example, they'll have information that it doesn't exactly correspond with each chapter in the manual, but a lot of the most general information is here. If we click on the paper format, I can scroll down and you'll see information on the order of pages, line spacing, sample pages. I'm going to pop in here and see what they have listed under professional sample paper one more time for the author. So for the person who asked me that question about whether or not you would use the College of Nursing and Health Professions, if you're publishing a paper, you're going to be using the professional paper format, and they are using the location of where this person is publishing from, whether you're working there or not. I also like that they have these little breadcrumbs here because it makes it a lot easier to move within the website. Also note that they will tell you exactly where to find information within the manual when they cite something here. And they'll let you know if it's something that's new to the 7th edition. If it's a continuation of the 6th edition, they have another notation. I also wanted to point out the heading section. I had a version of that on my slides, but this will show you exactly how you should format your headings and includes information on headings in the introduction. Information on bias-free language. So I just selected disability, and they spell out examples of first-person language, identity-first language, and how you can choose between the two. They also have a section on negative and condescending terminology and examples of bias-free language and things that are problematic. These may be terms that we use on a regular basis, so it might be something that you want to check as you're writing. Information on tables and figures, and I get a lot of questions about table setup. And finally, there's information here that I am not touching upon or haven't touched upon at all on research and publication. Information on journal article reporting standards, and I think some of this covers the type of formatting that you would use for a quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method paper. So if you're publishing papers like that, you may want to look into this research and publication section here, as well as within the manual. And more details on mechanics of style. So in addition to this style and grammar guideline section, I think the instructional aids are pretty good. Faculty, I know when you're working with students, we're working on terms, you've only got 10 weeks. It's really hard to fit in information on using different styles like APA. But you can send your students to the tutorial and webinar section. Now, this is a basic tutorial, and although all of these are somewhat lengthy, you can also always point out different sections that you want them to cover. Sometimes students work better with visual examples. Let's see if I can go back one screen. Yep. So they've got a few different webinars. All of these are free. I know that students have some difficulty sometimes with paraphrasing and when to cite and when it's oversighting. And I don't know how this is going to pop up in terms of sound, so I will try it. Not great coming over Zoom probably, but you can always point out a certain timestamp within the webinar for sections that you want them to go over. So it might be a helpful supplement to what you're teaching in class. The last thing I wanted to mention was the blog. And I used to use the blog for version 6 all the time. I thought it was really helpful because, in part, because the 6th edition was so hard for me to find things, but I could just search within the blog and it would always point out an example of where I could find it within the manual, and that was very helpful. Now, for version 7, I found the blog isn't quite as useful because, as you can see, they don't cite or they don't blog as often. This one's September 21st, the one before that is August 14th, and they used to do it all the time. So rather than just searching the blog, I search across the entire website. And I found that to be pretty useful. I was helping someone the other day, and I don't even remember what the topic was anymore, but I looked for clinical practice references. So I'm going to show you that search because I was really pleased with it. I'm a really bad typist, so bear with me. So let's see if I double click here. So here's the link to clinical practice references. And when I click on that, it gives me all different types of examples. Now, here it says the page contains reference examples for clinical practice nurses. I don't know why they just emphasize clinical practice nurses, because the last time I checked, lots of health science disciplines use UpToDate and Cochrane Reviews and so on. But this will give you examples of how to cite an UpToDate article, but it's also a good example of how to cite a reference on a web page when the content changes frequently. See how they include this retrieved and then the date? There are references on citing Cochrane Reviews, but I believe I was looking this up to find clinical practice guidelines within the government. So this has a group author, which is quite helpful. But yes, this was the one that I was looking for. So clinical practice guidelines by individual authors at a government agency published as part of a series. That is really in the weeds, but it's the kind of questions that I get. So you may find searching across the entire database really helpful. I am going to hop back to my slides because I want to start wrapping things up. So we've looked at general guidelines for styles, well, in general, and professional versus student formats within the APA manual, in-text citation, reference list changes for authors, DOIs, electronic resources, and changes in style mechanics. Plus, there are new focus on bias-free terminology. And we looked at some free APA resources. One more thing I wanted to mention. Often I get requests from students to proofread their paper or to read their papers for grammar. That's a little bit outside of the librarian scope, but Drexel does have a writing center, and I wanted to remind you of that. They'll help you with lots of areas in the writing process. They happen to be closed for face-to-face meeting this fall because of COVID, so the best way to reach them if you have questions is either email them at the email address in that slide, or if you need an appointment, you can set up an appointment by going to the link I have under appointments. They have writing consults for graduate and undergraduate students in different disciplines. And I think their hours are Monday through Thursday, 9 to 9. They've got Friday hours as well, and some limited hours, I believe, on Saturday and Sunday. But please check the website to find out their schedule. Now, there's overlap between what they'll assist you with and what the libraries will assist you with. The Writing Center will help you brainstorm a topic, outline or draft or revise your manuscript. The library will also help you brainstorm, but will help you refine your research topic, find information on that topic, and assess it for validity, organize your citations, and cite the information. We don't read through the papers to correct your citations? I get that question a lot, but if you have a specific citation question or two or three, we can help you work through that and show you how to find answers to those questions. So if you get those citation questions again, you know how to approach that the next time. Not sure if you had any questions. I just want to point out our library website. It's at library.drexel.edu. And we do have citation style guides. Let me show you that real quick. So if you go to this link, you'll see that this is our guide for various citation manuals. We actually have the electronic version of the AMA manual. I think the latest is the 11th edition. That is part of our collection, and we have it available electronically. You can also use the AMA Twitter feed. For APA, unfortunately, we just have print editions because APA does not sell an institutional version of their manual. They are happy to sell you individuals versions of the manual electronically, but they don't have an electronic version for institutions. But we do have links to our print manuals, links to the APA style guide, their website, blog, and so on, and examples of student and professional papers, as well as a few other styles listed here. So I'm not sure if there are any questions in chat, but I'm going to stop sharing. Go ahead.
Yeah, the only question that came up at the end is, will we have access to the slides?
Sure, I can make access to the slides, of course.
Yeah, if you send them to me, I'll distribute them out to the folks who are here in the room.
Okay, let me, so I'm going to stop sharing and let's see. I want to start my video again. Okay.
Fantastic.
I just wanted to leave this opportunity in case you had questions, not so much about APA, but if you had questions in general about reaching out to the libraries or using the libraries during this time, since our hours are a little bit less and there are some changes in procedures and policy because of COVID.
You should be able to turn your microphones on if you have a question that you want to raise to Janice.
Hi.
Go ahead, Levon.
So I guess, are all of the libraries available, or?
So we have 3 libraries on
Right.
campus, of course. The Hahnemann Library is available. We are open from 10 to 3 for physical access. Of course, our virtual services, such as reaching out to a librarian or borrowing materials online, that's been available since we shut down for COVID.
Okay.
But both the Hahnemann and Hagerty libraries are open from 10 to 3, and the Queen Lane Library hours are suspended for the time being, and we will be posting those hours as soon as they're available. And actually, you know what, let me do one more thing. I'm going to share my screen again because I want to show you where you can find that updated information because it changes a lot. So hold on for 1 second. Share this, and so hopefully you all can see the library's website here. This is at library.drexel.edu. And anytime you want to find updated information,
I think we're still seeing you.
You're still seeing me. All righty.
Yeah.
Let's start. Let's click on share.
There you go.
How's that?
Okay. Hey.
Yay. Yay. I know you want to see me, but I want to show you this link. So this COVID-19 update link, that is going to have the latest information about using the library, whether it's virtually or you're coming on campus. And if you do come on campus to use the libraries, you need to reserve a seat in advance to do that.
Oh.
And I will show you, let's take a step back. I will show you where to do that. So here under quick links, this is where you can reserve a seat. You just select that. You let us know if you want to come to the Hagerty Library, the floor you want to use, or the Hahnemann Library. And then when you select it, whether you want to use a study room, keeping in mind that a study room is just for you. You have that room all to yourself. We're not actually using them as group study rooms right now. Or, you know, if you want to study among others, you can sit at a table. You'll find that the tables are kind of marked off where you can sit and where you can't. And that's to make sure everyone has, you know, enough space for social distancing. Yeah, and the other thing that may be of interest to you is that, let's see if, I won't even bother to pull it up. I'll just tell you. If you're interested in borrowing something from our libraries and it's a physical item, you can either make a reservation you can request it for pickup. You know, we tell you to give us like 3 days because we got to pull it off the shelf, make sure we have it ready for you and everything else, or we will send it to you. So that we will send it to you at no cost and in a shipping container where you can send it back to us at no cost. Okay, so up to you, whether you want to come in or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions about this?
There don't seem to be any questions in the chat. I'm just going to put a little something in the chat for everybody who's here on the call. Just a quick evaluation survey of what you thought about today's Tuesday topic. I'll send this to you via email as well when I send Janice's slides. And just a quick plug for next week's Tuesday topic while we're all here. Please join us for Academic Allyship Reflections and Recommendations, which is going to be same time next Tuesday from 4 to 5. I think it's going to be a really interesting panel discussion. All right, so if there are no more questions, then we'll give you a few minutes of time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming out. Enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.